Hi everybody, welcome to Vysh IAS. This is Pranay and we are going to continue the Tamilnadu history textbook part 1 of class 11th. Before I start the class, I request everybody to like and share this video. Please comment and please reach us on the WhatsApp number provided here for any information regarding the test series or any other information regarding UPSC. We shall start. This is the chapter number 11th. This is the last chapter of this book, and this is the part 1 of the later Cholas and the Pandyas. We shall cover the later Cholas in this video, and the next video, the part 2 of the same chapter, will be giving the information regarding the Pandyas. So, what we are going to learn: the achievement of Chola rulers, cultural developments in the Chola region, emergence of well-developed agrarian structure and irrigation system, role of temples in medieval Tamil society, and maritime trade during Chola rule. Okay, and in the part 2 of this video, we will see about the Pandyas, the rise of Pandyas with Madurai as their capital, Malik Kafur's invasion and its fallout, succession dispute inviting the attention of Sultan Alauddin Khalji, agriculture, irrigation, and trade during the Pandya ruler, religion and culture in southern Tamil Nadu. So we shall start. Introduction. The Cholas belong to one of the three mighty dynasties that ruled the Tamil country in the early historical period. Described as Movendar in the Sangam literature, they were known for the valor and for their patronage of the Tamil language. Many songs were composed in high praise of their glories. However, after the Sangam period, until about the 9th century CE, there are no records about them. Okay, so after Sangam literature, there is a void. Okay, so there is no information till 9th century CE. Okay, the gap between Sangam literature, which was in the starting of the first century BC, first century to first century CE. Okay, that period was called as Sangam era. Okay, and between this Sangam era and the 9th century CE, the information is nowhere found. Okay, changes that overtook Tamil in the intervening period brought about the major transformation of the region and enabled the emergence of big, long-lasting monarchical states. The Cholas were one among them. Okay, so Cholas were very into the Tamil part of the country. Okay, which they call the Tamil country for themselves, was one of the areas of the Cholas. Okay, you will see in the map also in the coming slides. The river valleys facilitated the expansion of agriculture, leading to the emergence of powerful kingdoms. As I have said many times in my classes, the expansion of agriculture indirectly leads to a lot of development. As the agriculture grows, the economy grows, automatically the purchasing power grows, so automatically the economy and the development goes in a positive way. The agricultural boom resulted in production of considerable surplus, okay, considerable surplus of predominantly food grains, okay, food grains. But this surplus in production resulted in unequal distribution of wealth. Okay, so food grains, surplus was there, but because of this surplus, couple of people had lot of money and couple of people were just left with some money, which created the unequal distribution of wealth. Okay, society gradually became highly differentiated, unlike in the earlier period. Okay, so the differences started arising between people. Okay, in the previous period, you have seen like at a point of time, the differences between the people were being nullified. Okay, they were present. I'm not saying they were completely gone, but they were not predominantly, being very dominating in the people. Okay, the society was adjusting with everything. Okay, the people lived together inside a village and all, but now the differences started growing. Okay, institutions and ideas from the north of India, such as temples and religion it represented, emerged as a new force. Okay, this came from North India. Okay, the Bhakti movement, led by the Nayanmars and the Azawars, which we have read in the previous chapters, popularized the ideology and the faith they represented. Similarly, political ideas and institutions that originated in northern India soon found their way to the south as well. Okay? The cumulative result of the new developments was the formation of a state which in this case where the monarch presided over by the descendants of the old Chola lineage. Okay, the monarchy presided over by the descendants of the old Chola lineage. Okay, see, the older Chola period was there. It was still Sangam period. Okay, there is a void, and again the see these people. Okay, these people are the ancestors of these people. This void thing, we don't know. Okay, what has happened and all. But all of a sudden, these people came into limelight and they called, because they were, there was a void between them. So these were called as the Cholas and these are called as the later Cholas, basically. Okay. After the eclipse of the Chola kingdom, Pandyas, who began their rule in the Vaigai river basin at Madurai, wielded tremendous power during the 14th century. Okay, after the Chola kingdom, there came the Pandyas. Okay, like the Cholas, the Pandyas also realized substantial revenue from agriculture as well as from the trade. Okay, so trade and agriculture became very important. The trade expansion overseas continued in Pandya rule. Tirunelveli region, which was part of the Pandyan kingdom, exported grain, cotton cloth, and bullocks to the Malabar coast and had trade contacts with West and Southeast Asia. Pandya kings produced a cultural heritage by synthesizing the religious, cultural, and political elements, and it differed totally with the assumed homogeneity of the classical ages of Gupta. The Cholas. We shall see who were the Cholas, okay, and how they originated. The origin of the dynasty. Records available to us after the Sangam age show that the Cholas remained as subordinates to the Pallavas in the Kaveri regions. The void which we were talking, okay, at that point of time, they remained as subordinates to the Pallavas in the Kaveri region. The re-emergence of Cholas began with Vijayalaya, who was serving from 850 to 871 CE, conquering the Kaveri Delta from Muttarayar. He built the city of Tanjavur and established the Chola kingdom in 850. Historians therefore refer to them as later Cholas or imperial Cholas. Okay? In the copperplate documents of his successors that are available, the Chola trace their ancestry to the Karikala, the most well known of the Chola of the Sangam age. Okay, the first Cholas who were there. Okay, they call themselves the Karikala, who was the part of the Chola of the Sangam age. These people who came in the later Cholas call themselves as the ancestors. Okay, in their genealogy, an eponymous king, Chola, is mentioned as the progenitor. Okay, the names of Killi, Kokgenan, and the Karikalan are mentioned as members of the line in these copper plates. Okay, Vijayalaya's illustrious successors started from Parantaka I, who was from 907 to 955, to Kulontunga III, who was from 1163 to 1216, brought glory and fame to the Cholas. Parantaka Chola set the tone for expansion of the territory, okay, and broadened the base of its governance. And then Rajaraja I, who was 985 to 1014, the builder of the most beautiful Brihadishwara temple at Tanjavur, which is also called as the Big Temple, okay, and his son Rajendra I from 1012 to 1044, whose naval operations extended as far as Srivijaya. Srivijaya is basically the southern Sumatran islands. Okay, consolidated the advances made by their predecessors and went on to establish Chola hegemony in the peninsular India. Okay, so the importance, the Parantaka Chola was very important in the expansion of the territory. Rajaraja I, he built the Brihadishwara temple at Tanjavur. This information is very important, and I request everybody to note it down in your notebook. For it will be very easy for revising. Okay, and Rajendra Chola I extended almost up to the Sumatran Islands. Okay, so this is the Brihadishwara temple at Tanjavur. Okay, this is also known as Big Temple, and you can see it in the Google if you want more and more information. And a lot of information has been provided in the upcoming slides also. Sources: more than 10,000 inscriptions engraved on copper and stone form. Okay, copper and stone form the primary sources of the study of Chola history. The inscriptions mainly record the endowments and donations to the temples made by the rulers and other individuals. Land transactions and taxes, both collections and exemptions, form an important part of their content. Later day inscriptions make a mention of the differentiation in the society, giving an account of the castes and subcastes, and thus providing us information on the social structure. Besides stone inscriptions, copper plate contains the royal orders. They also contains details of genealogy, wars, conquests, administrative divisions, local governance, land rights, and various taxes levied. Okay, this is one of the inscriptions found on the big temple, the Brihadishwara temple, present in the Tanjavur. Literature also flourished under Cholas. The important religious works in Tamil include codification of the Shaivite and Vaishnavite canons. The quasi-historical literary works Kalingatu Puttarani, Kulotu- Kulotungan Cholan Pillai Tamil were composed during their reigns. Muvarula and Kamba Ramayanam, the great epic, belongs to this period. Neminatam, Viracholium, Nannul are noted grammatical works. Pandikovai, Takkayagapparani are also important literary works composed during this period. I request everybody to note this down in a notebook for your easy revision. These become very important for the prelims perspective. Territory. Traditionally, the area under the Chola dynasty in the Tamil country is known as Nadu or the Chola Nadu. Okay, Nadu means more or less a country kind of a thing. Their core kingdom was concentrated in the Kaveri fed delta called Chola Mandalam. This term came to be corrupted as Coromandel in the European languages, which often referred to the entire eastern coast of the southern India. Okay, the Coromandel word, which came after the European influence, was actually derived from the Chola Mandalam. The Chola kingdom expanded through military conquest to include present-day Pudukottai, Ramantapuram districts, and the Kongu country of the present-day Western Tamil Nadu. Okay, so military conquest covered the present Pudukkottai and the Ramantapuram districts as well as the Kongu part of the western Tamil Nadu. By the 11th century, through invasions, Chola extended their territory to Tondainadu or the northern part of the Tamil country, Pandiradu or the southern parts of the Tamil country, Gangaiwadi or the portions of southern Karnataka, and Malay Mandalam, the Kerala territory. Okay, the Tondainadu is the northern part of the Tamil country, the Pandinadu is the southern part, and the Gangaiwadi or the southern Karnataka, and Malay Mandalam, which is the Kerala territory. Okay, these all were covered in their territory. The Cholas ventured overseas, conquering the northeastern part of the Sri Lanka, bringing it under their control, and they called it Mummudi Chona Mandalam. Okay, the present day Sri Lanka is also the part of the Chola Mandalam, basically. Okay, it was also a part of the Chola dynasty, and they also indirectly had a great influence on the Kalinga part, okay, the present day Orissa to almost covering up to the West Bengal, as well as almost till this, what do we call, the Sumatran Islands, the Malay Peninsula, okay, the Andaman and Nicobar, and most part of the Malay Peninsula, the Indonesian Peninsula, as well as the what do we call this, Burmese part. Okay, they had great influence, and the southern part of India, covering most of the Kerala and the Tamil Nadu and parts of Andhra also under them directly, as well as the Sri Lanka also. Okay, and the Sri Lanka was called as Mummudi Chola Mandalam. So the empire building, Rajaraja I is most celebrated of the Chola kings. He engaged in naval expeditions and emerged victorious in west coast Sri Lanka and conquered the Maldives in the Indian Ocean. Okay, the military victory of Rajaraja I over Sri Lanka led to its northern and eastern portions coming under the direct control of the Chola authority. This was the Rajaraja Chola. Okay. Rajaraja I appointed a Tamil chief to govern the annexed regions and ordered a temple to be built. It is called the Shiva Devale, Shrine of Shiva. The Chola official appointed in Sri Lanka built a temple in a place called Mahatita. Okay. The temple is called Rajarajeshwara. Okay, the temple's name is called as Rajarajeshwara. It is in a place called Mahatitta, and it is in Sri Lanka. Okay, even as he was alive, Rajaraja I appointed his son Rajendra Chola I. Okay, the Rajendra I as the successor. Okay, he was alive, but he appointed his son. Okay, for 2 years they jointly ruled the Chola kingdom. Okay, they jointly ruled. This is a very rare phenomena, okay, which we can usually see in the history. Okay, Rajendra I took part in the military campaigns of his father, attacking the western Chalukyas. Consequently, the boundary of the Chola Empire extended up to Tungabhadra River. Okay, when Rajaraja I attacked Madurai, the Pandyas escaped with their crown and royal jewels and took shelter in Sri Lanka. Thereupon Rajendra I conquered Sri Lanka and confiscated the Pandya crown and the royal belongings. Okay, he had an expedition. Okay, he chased these Pandyas till Sri Lanka. Okay, and he confiscated the Pandya crown as well as the royal belongings. Sorry. Rajendra I conducted the most striking military exploit after his accession in 1023 by his expedition to northern India. He led the expedition up to Godavari river and asked his general to continue beyond that place. The Gangaikonda Cholapuram temple was built to commemorate his victories in the northern India. Okay, the Gangaikonda Cholapuram temple. Okay, it is a beautiful temple. You will see in the upcoming slides. This is the Gangaikonda Cholapuram temple, and this was to commemorate his victory in northern India. Okay, during the Chola reign, the naval achievements of the Tamils reached its peak. Okay, so the naval achievements were considerably very uh, high in the Cholas time. Okay, the Cholas controlled both the Coromandel and the Malabar coast. Okay, both the sides of the Indian peninsula, this part also and this part also, both of them were covered by controlled by them itself. The Chola navy often ventured into Bay of Bengal for some decades. Okay, Rajendra's naval operation was directed against Srivijaya, okay, which we have read, okay, in the previous slides. Srivijaya kingdom, the southern Sumatra, was one of the prominent maritime and commercial states that flourished from 700 to 1300 in the Southeast Asia. Similarly, Kheda, the Kadaram feudatory kingdom under Srivijaya, was also conquered by the Rajendra. Okay. The Chola invasions of Western Chalukya Empire, undertaken in 1003 by Rajaraja I and 1009 by Rajendra I, were also successful. Rajendra sent his son to ransack and ravage its capital, Kalayani. Okay, the Dwarapala, the doorkeeper image. This is the doorkeeper image which I am talking. Okay, he brought from Kalayani, was installed at the Darasuram temple near the Kumbakonam, which can be seen even today. We will see the Darasuram temple in the upcoming slides. Rajendra I assumed the titles such as Mudikonda Cholan, the crowned Cholan, Gangai Kondan, the conqueror of the Ganges, Kadaram Kondan, the conqueror of the Kadaram, and Pandita Cholan, the scholarly Chola. If somebody asks, or the UPSC asks, like the Gangai Kondan was title attained by, okay, or taken by, they will give some couple of options, and there is a possibility like they will include Raja Cholan and these kind of options. We should not confuse, okay. We shall see about the Chola administration now. The king. Okay, historians have debated the nature of the Chola state. Clearly, it was presided over by a hereditary monarchy. Obviously, okay, king is not a guy who has been elected by votes. Okay, he is a monarch. The king is presented in glowing terms in literature and inscriptions of the period, venerated on par with God. Okay, the king were invariably addressed as Peruman or Perumagan, the big man. Okay, Ulagudai Perumal, the Lord of the world, and Ulagudaya Nayanar, the Lord of the world. Okay, later the adopted the titles such as Chakravarti, Emperor, Tribhuwana Chakravarti, the Emperor of the three worlds. Okay. At the time of coronation, it was a practice to add the suffix Deva to the name of crowned kings. Okay, the kings drew legitimacy by claiming that they were a comrade of God, Tambiran Tozar. Okay, Chola rulers appointed Brahmins as spiritual preceptors or Rajagurus. Okay, the kingdom's guide. Rajaraja I and Rajendra I mention the names of Rajagurus and Sarvasivas in their inscriptions. Patronizing Brahmins were seen to enhance their prestige and legitimacy. Chola kings therefore granted huge estates of land to Brahmins as Brahmadeyams and Katurvedi Mangalams pronounced as Chaturvedi Mangalam. Okay, provinces. As mentioned earlier, the territories of Chola state had been expanding steadily even from the time of Vijayalaya. At the time of conquest, these areas were under the control of minor chiefs described by historians as feudatories. Okay? Rajaraja I integrated these territories and appointed viceroys. Okay? See, till Rajaraja I, these were controlled by minor chiefs and very small kingdom kind of plots, and which were called as or considered as feudatories. Okay, they used to consider uh, the king, okay, the emperor as the king, but they maintained their own small kingdoms. But now Rajaraja one came into the picture, okay, and he integrated these territories and appointed viceroys in these regions. Chola Panda, sorry, Chola Pandya in Pandinadu, Chola Lankeshwara in Sri Lanka, which was renamed as Mummudi Chola Mandalam, as we have read previously, and Chola Ganga in Gangavadi region of southern Karnataka. In other less prominent regions, the territories of chiefs such as Irukku Ilango or Mazavas or Banas were made part of the Chola state, and their chiefs were inducted into the state system as its functionaries. Now, the army. Cholas maintained a well organized army. The army consisted of three conventional divisions: infantry, the cavalry, which was called as Kudirai Sevagar, and the elephant corps, which were called as Anai Yatkar. Okay. There were also bowmen, Villa Legal, the sword bearers Valilar, and the spearmen Koduvar. Two types of ranks in the army are also mentioned: the upper and the lower. Perundanam, which are the upper, and the Chirudanam, which is the lower rank. According to the Chinese geographer of the 13th century, the Chola army owned 60,000 war elephants. Okay, they had around 60,000 war elephants that, when fighting, carried on their backs houses, and these houses was full of soldiers who shoot arrows at long range and fight with spears at close quarters. Okay, the overseas exploits of the Cholas were well known, and it led historians to refer to their navy with numberless ships. Okay, generally the soldiers enjoyed Padai Paru, the military holding rights. So this is a kind of representation. The elephants carried small houses kind of thing on their back, and couple of soldiers uh, fired these arrows uh, from them, and they also had the spears and all with them if they want to fight on a close combat. Cantonments, which were established in the capital city, were known as Padaividu. Military outposts in the conquered territory were called Nilai Padai. The the captain of the regiment was known as Nayagam, and later he assumed the title of Padai Mudali. The commander in chief was Senapati and Danda Nayagam. Okay, the commander in chief, Senapati and Danda Nayagam. Local organization. Various local groups functioned actively in the Chola period. These were bodies as Urar, Subayar, Nagaratar, and Nattar. Okay, they were relatively autonomous organizations of the respective groups. They are considered the building blocks using which the edifice, the Chola state, was built. We shall see about Urar. With the expansion of agriculture, numerous peasant settlements came up in the countryside, They were known as Ur. The Urar, who were landlords in the villages, acted as spokesperson in the Ur. Okay, so basically they are the spokesperson of the Ur. Okay, the Urar were entrusted with the upkeeping of the temples, maintenance of the tanks, and managing the water stored in them. They also discharged the administrative functions of the state, such as collection of revenue, maintenance of law and order, and obeying the king's orders. Sabhayar. If the Ur was a settlement of land holders, largely consists of peasants of Vellangai, the Brahmadeya was a Brahmin settlement. Okay, the Brahmadeya was a Brahmin settlement. The Sabha looked after the affairs of the settlement, including those of the temples at the core of Brahmadeya and its assets. It was also responsible for maintaining irrigation tanks attached to the temple lands. Okay, like the Ur, the Sabha also functioned as the agent of the state in carrying out administrative, fiscal, and judicial functions. Nagaratta. Nagaram was a settlement of traders. However, skilled artisans engaged in the masonry, ironsmithing, goldsmithing, weaving, and pottery also occupied the settlement. It was represented by the Nagarattar, who regulated their associations with temples which needed their financial assistance. In the reign of Rajaraja I, Mamalapuram was administered by a body called Managaram. Okay, Mahanagaram kind of a word. Okay, local goods were exchanged in the Nagaram. These goods include silk, porcelain, camphor, cloves, sandalwood, and cardamom, according to Chinese accounts. In order to promote trade, inland and seaway, Kulotunga revoked the collection of toll fee, which was called as Sungam. You need to remember these kind of words. These are very important for prelims. Hence, he was conferred the title Sungam Tavirta Cholam. Nattar. Nadu. Okay, Nadu, which we are discussing since the starting, was a grouping of several Uds, excluding Brahmadeyas, formed around irrigation sources such as canals and tanks. Okay, they were excluding the Brahmadeyas, which formed around irrigation sources. Okay, Nattar, literally those belonging to the Nadu, were the assembly of landholders of the Vellangai villages, that is Urth in Nadu. Okay, Nattar functioned as pillars of the state structure under the Cholas. They discharged many of the administrative, fiscal, and judicial responsibilities of the state. They held hereditary land rights and were responsible for remitting the tax from respective Nadu to the state. Landholders of Nadu held the honorific titles such as Asudayan, the possessor of the land, Arayan, the leader, and Kilawan, which is the headman. There were functionaries such as Nattu Konakku and the Nattu Viyavan, the recording the proceedings of the Nattar. In couple of inscriptions, it has been mentioned about the local elections, a kind of local democracy. The Uttara Mirur inscription. Two inscriptions around 919 and 921 from Brahmadeya, the tax-free land gifted to Brahmins, called as Uttara Meru, historically called Uttara Mallur, Chaturvedi Mangalam. Okay, we have seen the Chaturvedi Mangalam specifically given to the people. Okay, give details of the process of electing members of various committees that administer the affairs of Brahmin settlement. This village was divided into 30 wards. Okay, one member was to be elected from each ward. These members would become members of different committees: Public Works Committee, Tank Committee, Garden Committee, Famine Committee, and Gold Committee. The prescribed qualifications for becoming a ward member were clearly spelled out. Okay, the qualification for the ward member to become a ward member were clear. Okay, a male above 35 and below 75. Okay, there was age restriction. He has to be above 35 and below 75, having a share of property and a house of his own. Okay, with knowledge of Vedas and Bhashyas was considered eligible. Okay, there was age criteria. He has to be above 35 and below 75, and there has to be a property as well as a house, and he should be possessing knowledge of Vedas, okay, and Bhashyas. The names of qualified candidates from each ward were written on the palm leaf slips and put into a pot known as Kudavolai. Okay, the eldest of the assembly engaged a boy to pull out one slip and would read the name of the person selected. Okay, now we will see the economy. One of the major developments in this period was the expansion of agriculture. Okay, people settled in fertile river valleys and even in the areas where there were no rivers, and arrangements were made for irrigation by digging tanks, wells, and canals. This led to the production of food grain surplus. Society got differentiated in a big way. Okay? The Chola state collected land tax out of the agrarian surplus for its revenue. There was an elaborate department of land revenue known as Puravu, Puravuvari Tenaikalam. Okay? Puravuvari Tenaikalam with its chief called Puravuvari Tenaikalam Nayagam. Okay, the Nayagam word is used as a chief. Land revenue and survey. For the purpose of assessing tax, the Cholas undertook extensive land surveys and revenue settlements. Rajaraja I around 1001 and Kulutonga around 1086 and Kulutonga III 1226 appointed people for land survey so that the land could be classified and assessed for the purpose of taxation. Like other functionaries of the state, the surveyors of the land called Nadu Vagai Sekira. Okay, the Nadu Vagai Sekira, two hailed from the landholding communities. Various units of the land measurement such as Kuli, Ma, Veli, Patti, Padagam, etc. are known with the local variations. Please make note of these. These are very important. Already UPSC 2020 there was a question Kula Vyapa, Drona Vyapa. These kind of questions like Kuli, Ma, Veli. What kind of words are these? These kind of questions are very common. Okay, generally taxes were collected in different forms. The taxes collected included Irai, Kanikadan, Irai Kattina, Kanikadan, and Kadami. An important category of tax was Kudimai. Kudimai was paid by the cultivating tenants to the government and to the landlords and the bearers of honorific titles such as Udayan, Arayan, and Kilavar. Opati were levied and collected by the kings and local chiefs. The tax rates were fixed depending on the fertility of the soil and the status of the landholder. Okay, the status of the landholder was also considered. Temples and Brahmins were exempted from paying the taxes. The tax paid in kind was referred to as Irai Kattina Nellu. All these were mostly realized from the Kaveri Delta but not widely in the outskirts. At the village level, Urar, the village assembly, were responsible for collecting the taxes and remitting them to the government. At the Nadu level, the Nattar were responsible for remitting taxes. The Nattar. Okay? Irrigation. The Chola undertook measures to improve irrigation systems that was in practice. As the state was drawing most of its revenue from agriculture, the Cholas focused their efforts on managing water resources. Vativyakal, a crisscross channel, is a traditional way of harnessing rainwater in Kaveri Delta. Vati runs in north-south direction, while Vaikal runs in the east-west direction. Okay, Vati runs in the north-south direction and Vaikal runs in the east-west direction. Okay, technically, Vati is a drainage channel. Okay, and Vaikal is a supply channel. Okay, so there will be a supply channel and small drainage channels will be there. So this kind of crisscross irrigation system they were using. The water running through vehicle to the field was to be drained out to Vati and to another vehicle. Rainwater would flow from where the natural canal started. Okay, many irrigation canals are modifications of such natural canals. The harnessed water was utilized alternatively through Vati and vehicle. Here, the mechanism designed was such that water was distributed to the parceled out lands in sequel. Okay, many canals were named after kings, queens, and gods. Some examples of the names are Uttama Chola Vayakkal, Pancha Vanamadevi Vayakkal, Ganavati Vayakkal. Urvayakkal was owned jointly by the land owners. The Nadu level Vayakkal was referred to as Natu Vayakkal. The turn system was practiced for distributing the water. Chola inscription lists some big size irrigation tanks such as Chola Varidhi, Kalyaneri, Vairamageti, Tataka, created by the Pallavas, Bahur Big Tank, and Rajendra Chola Periyayiri. For the periodical or seasonal maintenance and repair of the irrigation works, conscripted labor was used. Paddy as tax was collected by a unit called kalam. Okay, it was around 28 kgs. One kalam was 28 kgs. Rajaraja once standardized the collection of taxes. Okay, he collected 100 kalam from the land of one valley, which is around 6.5 acres. The standard valley being variable according to the fertility of the soil and the number of crops raised. Okay. The irrigation work done by Rajendra Chola I at Gangaikonda Cholapuram was an embankment of solid masonry around 16 miles long. Rajendra described it as Jalamayam Jayasthambam, meaning pillar of victory in water. The Arab traveler Al-Biruni visited the place 100 years later. On seeing them, he was wonderstruck and said, "Our people, when they see them, wonder at them and are unable to describe them, much less construct anything like them." Records Jawaharlal Nehru in the glimpses of world history. Water management. Different kind of water rights were assigned. Okay, these rights regulated the share of water from the tanks and wells. It also entailed the right of deepening and broadening the channels and repairing the irrigation system. The allotment of water is described as Ninkinintavaru, share of water as allotted. The water was released through Kumis, sluice or Talaive, the head channel. Royal orders warned the people against the violation of water rights and encroachment of water resources gifted to Brahmadeya settlements. Commonly owned village tank was called as Enka Kulam. Land transactions in form of donation and endowment were accompanied by water rights as well. For the periodical and seasonal maintenance and repair of the irrigation tanks, rendering free labor was in practice. Vetti and Amanji were the forms of free labor related to public works at village level. Village assemblies under the Cholas collected a tax called as Erayam, which was utilized for repairing irrigation tanks. Okay, Erayam, remember this. Sometimes local leaders like Arayan repaired and renovated irrigation tanks destroyed in a storm. These were instances of the water from a tank shared by villagers at the temple. Social groups known as Talayavar Channarar, Eri Arayyarkal were in charge of releasing the water through the head channel and sluice from the rivers or tanks. A group of people who were in charge of Kulam was called Kulattar. In the later period, temples were entrusted with the upkeeping of irrigation sources. So these are the Kavinattu Konmai with the Chola inscriptions. The inscriptions are there. We shall see about the society and its structure. In the predominantly agrarian society prevailing during the Chola period, land holdings was a prime determinant of social status and hierarchy. The Brahmin landholders called the Brahmadeya Kilavars at the top Brahmadeya settlements with tax exemption were created, displacing Kudiniki, the local peasants. Temples were gifted land known as Devadana, which was also exempted from tax, as in the Brahmadeyas. The temples became the hub of several activities during the period. The landholders of Vellangai villages were placed next in the social hierarchy. Okay, the first were the Brahmins. Okay, second were Vellangai villages. Ulukudi, the tenants, could not own land but had to cultivate the lands of Brahmins and holders of Vellangai villages. Okay, Ulukudi are the tenants, while landholders retained Melavaram, the major share in the harvest. The Ulukudi got Kizavaram, the lower share. Okay, laborers known as Panicheyamakkal and slaves Adimaigal stayed at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Outside the world of agrarian society were the armed men, who were usually from the army, and the artisans and traders. There are documents that make mention of cattle keepers who apparently constituted a considerable section of the population. There certainly were tribals and forest dwellers about whom our knowledge is scanty. Religion. Puranic Hinduism, represented by the worship of Shiva, Vishnu, and associated deities, had become popular by the time of Cholas. A large number of temples dedicated to these deities were built. The temples were provided vast areas of land, and a considerable section of population came under their influence. Chola rulers were advanced Saivites. Okay, Parantaka I and Uttama Chola, who was in 907 to 970, made provisions and gifted the land to promote religion. Okay, in a fresco painting in which Rajaraja I is portrayed with his wives worshipping Lord Shiva in Tanjavur Brihadishwarar temple. One of the titles of Rajaraja I is Shiva Pada Sekaran, one who clutches the foot of Lord Shiva. Okay, Shiva was the preeminent god for the Cholas, and he represented in two forms. Okay, the iconic form of Shiva was Lingodbhava. Okay, the iconic form was Lingodbhava, and the Nataraja idol was the human form. Okay, a trace of the locations of temple centers in Kaveri Delta could provide us the map of an agrarian political geography, spatially and temporally. The repeated representation of Tripurantaka, the destroyer of three mythical cities of Asura, form of Shiva in sculpture and paintings gave him a warrior aspect and helped in gaining legitimacy for the ruler. Okay, this is Tripurantaka, the form of Shiva, who is considered to be destroyer of three mystical cities of the Asura. Okay, this has been in a sculpture as well as couple of paintings too. Okay, and this is the Nataraja, the human form, and the Lingodbhava, the iconic form. The representation of Nataraja or Adal Vallan, king of dance, in the form of idol was the motive of Tamil music, dance, drama, with hymns composed by Nayanmars, the Shaiva saints. These hymns sang the praise of Shaiva and extolled the deeds of God. They held great appeal to the devotees from different social sectors. The Shaiva canon, the Tirumurai, okay, the Tirumurai is the Shaiva canon, codified after it was recovered by Nambi Andar Nambi. Okay, Oduars and Padikkam Paduvars were appointed to sing in temples to recite Tirumurai daily in the temple premises. The singers of hymns were known as Vinappamisive. The players of percussion instruments were also appointed. Girls were dedicated for service of God. Musicians and dance masters also were appointed to train them. Okay. A highly evolved philosophical system called Shaiva Siddhanta was founded during this period. Okay. The foundational text of this philosophy, Sivajnana Bodham, was composed by Mekandar. 14 texts, collectively called Shaiva Siddhanta Shastram, form the core of this philosophy. In later times, many Shaiva monasteries emerged and expounded this philosophy. The devotion of Chola rulers to Shaivism became a strong passion in due course of time. Kolotunga too, for instance, exhibited such a trait. Okay? The theological tussle was fierce between state religion, Shaivism, and Vaishnavism, so much that Vaishnavism was sidelined to extent of its apostle Sri Ramanuja leaving the Chola country for the Melkote in Karnataka. So Ramanuja, who was living in the Chola country, was part of the Chola country because of the Vaishnavism being sidelined, okay, and the Shaivism being hyped. He had to leave the Chola country, okay, and he went to Melkote in Karnataka. Builders of the temple. The Cholas built and patronized innumerable temples. We have discussed, like, many temples have came in the previous slides. The royal temples in Tanjavur, Gangaikonda Cholapuram, and Dharasuram are the repositories of architecture, sculpture, paintings, iconography of the Chola arts. Okay, the temples became the hub of social, economic, cultural, and political activities. This is the Tanjavur temple. This is huge. We have discussed it in the previous slides also, and it will be elaborately described in the coming slides. Okay, and this is Dharasuram Airateshwara temple. Okay, this is something designed in a chariot way, and it's beautiful actually. Okay, the paraphernalia of the temples, including temple officials, dancers, musicians, singers, players of musical instruments, and their macers headed by the priests worshipping the gods, reflect the royal court. Okay. In the initial stages, architecturally, the Chola temples are simple and modest. Sepulchral temples also are built where the kings were buried. Okay. These sepulchral temples are basically the place where the kings were buried, okay, which is was called as Palip Padai. Okay, temple as a social institution. Chola temples became the arena of social celebrations and functioned as social institutions. They became the hub of societal space in organizing social, political, economic, and cultural activities. The prime temple officials were Koyarmar, Koil Kanakku, the temple accountant, Deva Kanmi, the agent of God, Sri Vaishnavar, Kantesar, the temple manager, and others. Okay. They promoted the development of learning, dance, music, painting, and drama. A play called Raja Raja Natakam. Okay, Raja Raja Natakam is a play which is based on the life of Raja Raja I, was performed in the Tanjavur temple. Okay, the festivals of Chittirai Tiruviza, Kartigai, Ayyappa Siviza were celebrated. It is said that singing hymns in the temple premises promoted oral literacy. Okay, it promoted oral literacy. Traditional dance items like Kudak Kutu and Sakaik Kutu were portrayed in the forms of sculptures and paintings in the temples. Kilapaliyur, Tiruvariyur, Nirutya, and Karna, okay, poses are shown in these cultural forms in Tanjavur Big Temple. Traditional Tamil musical instruments also portrayed in this way. See, you can see these are a couple of paintings, okay, showing a couple of musical instruments and the poses and the dances, and this is a sculpture found on the temple. Okay, it is also showing some sort of dance form with couple of instruments in their hands. The pastoral group, as a mark of devotion, donated livestock of specified number to the temple so as to maintain the perpetual lamp to be lit in the temple. Okay, to record their gift, their names were engraved in the inscriptions of royal temple. Thus, they earned royal affinity. Okay, the oil pressers called Shankara Paradiyar. Okay, Shankara Paradiyar supplied oil to the temple. Okay, and became part of the functionaries of the temple. In times of famine, some of them sold themselves to the temples as servants. Temples functioned as banks by advancing loans and by purchasing and receiving endowments and donations. Okay, they also became educational centers as training was imparted in Vedas, music, and the arts. Sculpture and metal works too were promoted. Okay, temple accounts were audited, and the auditor was called as Koila Kanakku. Okay, they were audited. Okay, now we have problem with auditing the temples. A lot of temples, very famous temples, are in news where there is opposition for auditing of the temple treasures and all. But that time itself, a couple of hundreds of years previously, they were so clear, like temple accounts were audited. Okay, so we will see the Gangaikonda Cholapuram, the capital city. So the temple in the Gangaikonda Cholapuram is beautifully built, and it is built on the model of Brihadishwara temple. Okay, and it was built by the Rajendra one, and it was built in the commemoration of his victory in the northern India. Okay, he built an irrigation tank called Chola Ganga near the capital, called the Jalastamba, which is water pillar. Okay, so it became the coronation center, which was a Chola's landmark. So it's still there. It is known as Ponneri Tank now. Okay, the historic name is Chola Gangam. It has been in here, and you can even check in the Google for more information. The sculptures of Ardhanarishwara, Durga, Vishnu, Surya, Kantesa, Anugrahamurti are the best pieces of idols of gods placed in the niches of the outer walls of the sanctum. You can see this is Ardhanarishwara. The half of the part will be male and half of the part will be female. Okay, this is Durga. This is Anugrahamurti, and lot more of the idols have been placed on the walls. Brihadishwara temple, the grand temple of the Tanjore. It's also called as the big temple. It's really huge. It's really massive. Okay, and if it is possible for you, just visit in, at least once in your lifetime. You will be just astonished by the huge structure in front of you, the way it has been made. Okay, known as Raja Rajeshwaram and the Brihadishwara temple, stands as an outstanding example of Chola architecture, painting, sculpture, and iconography. This temple greatly legitimized Rajaraja's polity. The sanctum, with a vimana of 190 feet, is capped with a stone weighing around 90 tons. Okay, the figures of Lakshmi, Vishnu, Ardhanarishwara, Bhikshadhana, a mendicant form of Shiva, on the outer walls of the sanctum are some unique features. The fresco paintings and the miniature sculptures of the scenes from the Puranas and epics in the temple walls reveal the religious ideology of the Chola. Dancing girls, musicians, and music masters were selected from the different settlements cutting across the Nadu divisions and were attached to this temple. Okay, singers had been appointed to recite the Bhakti hymns in the temple premises. Dharasuram Temple. Dharasuram Temple, built by Rajaraja II, remember this, okay, is yet another important contribution of the Cholas to the temple architecture. Incidents from the Periya Puranam is the form of miniatures are depicted on the base of Garbhagriha, the Sanctum Sanctorum, one of the wall. Okay, trade. The increased production in agriculture as well as artisanal activities led to trade and growing exchange of goods for goods. Okay, there was some sort of but. Okay, this trade activity involved the notions of price, profit, and market, which were not known in South India in the earlier period. Okay, two guild-like groups are known. Okay, Anjuvannathar and Manigramathar. Okay, Anjuvannathar comprised West Asians, including Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Okay, they were maritime traders and were settled along the port towns of the west coast. It is said that Manigramathar were busy with the trade in hinterland. Okay, they settled in interior towns like Kodumbalur, Urayur, Kovilpatti, and Piranmalai, and others. This Kovilpatti is famous for something else also. Okay, you just let us know in the comments. Okay, in due course, both groups merged and got incorporated. Okay, under the banner of Ainur Okay, Ainutruvar, Disai Airattu Ainutruvar, and Valinchiar, functioning through head guilds in Ayavole in Karnataka. This Ainutruvar guild controlled the maritime trade covering Southeast Asian countries. Munai Santai, Pudukkottai, Mylapore, Tiruvottiyur, the Chennai, Nagapattinam, Visakhapattinam, Krishnapattinam, the southern Nellore became the centers of maritime trade groups. In the interior, goods were carried on pack animals and boats. The items exported from the Chola land were sandalwood, ebony, condiments, precious gems, pepper, oil, paddy, grains, and salt. Imports included camphor, copper, tin, mercury, and etc. These were imports. Okay. Traders also took interest in irrigation affairs. Volunteer, a group of traders, once dug an irrigation tank called Ainutrupavereri in Pudukkottai. Okay. Cholas as patrons of learning. Chola kings were great patrons of learning who lavished support on Sanskrit education by instituting charities. From the inscriptions, we see that literacy skill were widespread. The great literary works Kamba Ramayanam and Periya Puranam belonged to this period. Okay. Rajendra I established a Vedic college at Ennairam, the South Arcot district. Okay, there were 340 students in this Vaishnava center. learning the Vedas, grammar, and Vedanta under 14 teachers. This example was later followed by his successors, and as a result, two more such colleges found at Tribhuvan near Pondicherry in 1048 and other at Trimukkudal, the Chengalpattu district in 1067. In Sanskrit centers, subjects like Vedas, Sanskrit grammar, religion, and philosophies were taught. Remuneration was given to teachers in land as service tenure. Okay, the end of Chola rule. The Chola dynasty was paramount in South India from the 9th to 13th century. By the end of 12th century, local chiefs began to grow in prominence, which weakened the center. Okay, with frequent invasions of Pandyas, the once mighty empire was reduced to the status of a dependent on far stronger Hoysalas. In 1264, the Pandyan ruler Jatavarman Sundara Pandyan I sacked the Chola capital of Gangaikonda Cholapura. With Kanchipuram lost earlier to the Telugu Cholas, the remaining Chola territories passed into hands of Pandyan king. Okay, 1279 marks the end of Chola dynasty with the king Maravarman Kulashekara Pandyan I defeated the last king Rajendra Chola III and established the ruler of Pandya. Okay, Sambu Varayars. Sambu Varayars were chieftains in the North Arcot and Chengalpattu regions during the reign of Chola kings Rajadiraja and Kulotunga III. Though they were feudatories, they were found fighting sometimes on the side of their overlords and occasionally against them also. Okay, they were on the both sides. From the last 13th century to the end of Pandya's ascendancy, they wielded power along the River region. The kingdom was called Raja Gambira Rajyam and the capital is Padaividu. Okay, inscriptions of Veera Chola Sambarayan has been found, okay, which he ruled around 1314 to 1353. Sambuvarayars assumed high titles such as Sakala Loka Chakravartin Venru Manakonda Sambuvarayan and Sakala Loka Chakravartin Rajanarayana Sambuvarayan. The latter, who ruled for 20 years, was overthrown by Kumara Kampana of Vijayanagara. It is after this campaign that Kumara Kampana went further south as far as Madurai, where he vanquished the Sultan of Madurai in a battle. Okay, so that's all for today, guys. This was the part 1 of the chapter number 11, which we covered, and the part 2 of the chapter will be coming soon, which will be we will clear about the Pandyas and the transition of Chola to the Pandyas and the end of the Pandyas. Okay, and with this chapter, we will be completing the part 1 of the Tamil Nadu history textbook, and we will be going towards the part 2 of the textbook. Okay, and I request everybody to please like this video and please share it with your friends in your groups and in other channels and all, and also please comment. Comment increases the engagement of the video. Okay, it increases the visibility of the video on YouTube. Okay, the YouTube algorithm works in that way. Okay, so that's the least you can do for the free content which we are providing. Okay, so that's all for today, guys, and you can also reach us on this number on WhatsApp for any sort of information and regarding the UPSC test series or any other courses or any sort of information regarding the UPSC. That's all for today, guys. Thank you and have a great day. Take care.